those of you that are interested in the phenomenon of gender in the context of work and organization. The journal is over 30 years old, and it's the first gender equality journal that specifically looks at gender relations, gendering in organizations. It was set up in 1994 by David Knights and Jill Rubry, and it focuses and really challenges some of the issues related to gendered power relations, identity, inclusion as well as exclusion, and more importantly, kind of more holistically recognizing gender regimes that exist, that penetrate all aspects of our life, our social life, our private life, and particularly our organizational life, and the gendering of organizations.
In this journal, one of our key themes is to support younger scholars, to support PGRs and ECRs.
Just a quick overview, and I'll point to one figure here, which is the right-hand side, right at the bottom, 5% acceptance rate. The process I'm going to go through, I'll try and explain what you probably should be looking at and thinking about to be part of that 5% acceptance rate.
I can give you some hints and some insight how to improve and how to aim for those specific journals.
Is it not frustrating when you are eager to access research papers and find that your university doesn't have the rights of subscriptions? And many of us, again, have experienced this, and I struggled when I was a doctoral student to access many papers. Is it not time we start to think about how we make research available and accessible to everyone?
It's with great pleasure that I would like to spend the next few minutes talking about the journal that I recently joined at the beginning of the year in January as a joint editor-in-chief, together with two of my colleagues and friends. Some of you may be aware that for the last 12 years have been involved with various journals in the field of entrepreneurship. These include Entrepreneurship and Regional Development, which is a 3-star ABS journal. I've also been involved with International Journal of Entrepreneurial Behavior Research and have led a couple of special issues and recently sort of completing a few editorials that are forthcoming at the end of the year. And I've also been involved with the Journal of Business Research. Today, I'd like to focus a little bit on this specific journal. The journal, very interesting, particularly for those of you that are interested in the phenomenon of gender in the context of work and organization. So the journal is over 30 years old, and it's the first gender equality journal that specifically looks at gender relations and specifically looks at organization of gender and gendering in organizations. It was set up in 1994 by David Knights and Jill Rubry, and it focuses and really challenges some of the issues related to gendered power relations, identity, inclusion as well as exclusion, and more importantly, kind of more holistically recognizing gender regimes that exist, that penetrate all aspects of our life, our social life, our private life, and particularly our organizational life, and the gendering of organizations. From the perspective of the types of publications that we accept and we work with, and I'll focus a little bit on that later on in this presentation. We accept in this journal theory-driven papers and empirical papers. We want the papers that are submitted to us to go beyond the mere description of the context, but also enabling our scholars, our writers, and our authors to advance the scholarship and understanding of the gendered relations in different contexts, whilst at the same time reflecting upon theory. It's a journal that publishes sophisticated papers that are focused on theoretical, epistemological, as well as methodological content. It's very interesting from the perspective of, for example, autoethnography, other types of ethnographic methods, as well as now with the changes kind of on the editorial board, we also accept work that kind of advances the types of data that goes beyond the mere subjective experiences of gender in the context of organizations, to also see and view things at organizational level and understanding the structural entanglements that are also intersected and interlaced with gender relations in this context. To publish in Gender Work and Organization, the manuscript from the outset, when it gets submitted, it needs to make a strong theoretical contribution. And when we talk about theoretical contribution, it's not, very difficult to really reveal the key aspects of the journal focused on gender as the first word in the title. It means that the theoretical contributions that we expect need to come from gender theory, from gender literature, yet at the same time be very kind of interconnected with the issues related to work and organization. And for the last 10 years, the journal has built its foundation as a critical journal, as a feminist knowledge-producing journal that really appreciates feminist philosophies and praxis, that really illuminates the issues of diversity and intersectionality of gendered experiences, that targets and focuses on issues that are related to decolonization, or kind of looking at post-colonial narratives, issues that are related to understanding post-feminist, post-humanist perspectives on feminism, also understanding embodied experiences, affect and organizing, issues related beyond kind of the post-heroic leadership, but really embracing the different perspectives and different understandings of gender that are more indigenous, that come from different places, not necessarily only from the West. Moving on to kind of our mission, and our mission hasn't changed at all. We still continue to focus on producing multidisciplinary research. We wanted the sort of high quality articles that continue to engage in dialogues on gender equality, diversity, inclusion in organizational settings. It's an important kind of sphere pathway of discovery and discussion in scholarship, and we hope that some of you that are attending today's workshop, but also might be inspired to write about things related to gender beyond the mere kind of variable perspective where we only within our data look at men and women, and that is it. That's not necessarily representing a theoretical view of what gender is. Gender is socially constructed, and how it permeates variety of layers in organizations are important. A little bit about the journal, which I think is quite interesting. So we have a number of citation impacts. So we're ranked at ABS 3. We are in Schemaggio Q1, and we also see kind of differences in how kind of COVID affected the journal. We had a drop in our impact factor, but I think this is something that's also quite recognized, considering the people who, or the authors that submit to the journal, they may have had other issues to resolve, and the majority of people that write on gender tend to be, and this is quite interesting, tend to be women, possibly mothers, possibly early career scholars that are also women. There are a few papers that have been produced by male scholars. However, when they do work on this particular articles and submissions, they tend to tackle very interesting issues too, issues of fatherhood, kind of looking at queer studies, contributing to our understanding of how gender roles and our gender paradigms are changing in different parts of the world. The acceptance rate as it stands for the last period, and this is the period that I've been part of the journal, is at 9%. We have and we are dealing with some of the issues of delay in kind of processing papers. We have improved already in 2024, but our publisher could only provide us with the data for 2023. I hope next time we do meet the editors, I'll give you some better dates, but actually the process is relatively straightforward. We publish 6 issues per year, and our target for 2024 is 150 articles. So it's actually quite a lot of papers that get accepted, and that also includes several special issues that are trickling through our system that tend to emerge from engagement in Gender Work and Organization Conference and kind of the proposals that we receive after the conference then populate the special issues. A little bit on author experience. I think this is very interesting. We publish several types of articles. We publish articles as they are. We also publish book reviews. One of the few journals that publishes book reviews. We also publish a few editorials. And what is interesting is the process that we follow. So all submissions, and we receive on average about 30 to 40 submissions a week. We are a very populous journal, which means that there are a lot of submissions. And as editors-in-chief, we go through these submissions and actually reject quite a lot of submissions without review. Those papers that we do push through into the review process, where we allocate them to our specialist associate editors to manage the rest of the process, we try to take care of those papers, and very few papers get rejected after they've passed on the first stage of kind of desk review. And at the moment, if we look at the kind of countries and regions of submissions, a lot of the submissions that come to the journal and those that get accepted come from Anglo-Saxon or English-speaking places. Very few papers come from places that we don't necessarily, like for example, with the main languages Portuguese, French, Italian, or Spanish. However, we're working on this and actually increasing the capacity in those areas by developing special issues that are produced originally in the native language, so i.e., for example, Spanish or Portuguese, and once the paper gets accepted, they will then get translated into English. So we're working on the authors, and we're changing the model a little bit of what is acceptable for a journal like Gender Work and Organization. So let me tell you a little bit about our editorial team. There are 3 of us as editors-in-chief. I'm delighted to work with both Bettina Bastian, who used to be the editor-in-chief of the Arab Journal of Management, and also with Brownwyn Aisha Wood, who used to be the editor of International Journal of Gender and Entrepreneurship. And as a team, we come with all types of methodologies. Bettina, who did her PhD on sort of technology and entrepreneurship originally, and Brownwyn, who comes to us with a very specific specialization in Islamic marketing, and myself, I did my degree in strategy, but then developed a very strong allegiance to understanding gender relations, and I teach a lot of the kind of gender-related subjects at my institution. I have been for the last 20 several years. So including issues of diversity, etc. We have an interesting team with very specific perspective, of course, on how we see the way forward for the journal. We have recently published an editorial, so if you're interested, please have a look. It's available as free to read to all individuals, and it highlights the kind of the direction of travel for this specific journal, particularly in the context of our tenure that will take place in the next sort of 3 years. We also have worked since our appointment in January on expanding and kind of diversifying our associate editor board. We have been successful to secure 30 absolutely fantastic scholars that are very famous in the field, that are working on various contexts, and they come from various contexts. And I think it's quite interesting to see alongside this other types of boards that we are developing. So, for example, in the next few months, we will see the emergence of the early career researchers board, which will kind of represent the new blood that's going to come into the journal and will work together alongside these wonderful individuals and us to develop their reviewing capacity, as well as sort of their personal kind of academic profile alongside the journal, and hopefully within the parameters of the journal's interest. We have quite a sort of wide variety of associate editors. Some come from UK, from Europe, from Global South, and we're working on expanding and kind of diversifying this even more. And in terms of topic representation, we have kind of addressed key themes specific to the mission that I presented earlier, as well as now with new additions of colleagues that come with a focus on diversity, equality and inclusion, on technology, grand challenges. And therefore, we hope that the topics that you will see also being kind of funneled through the review process are going to be representative of the variety of issues that are affected by gendered relations. The review process is relatively straightforward. People submit their papers to us. They straight away get randomly assigned to the three of us as editors-in-chief, and we do the initial cut. One of the key things we look for is really this engagement with gender theory. That's the initial hygiene factor on the basis of which we'll decide on whether the paper is interesting and it actually resonates with the journal reviewers as well as the possible readers. Of course, the topic needs to be novel, interesting, and relevant. The associate editors who then get assigned the papers that pass the desk, they do the second screening. They still have the right to reject the paper at that point, because as subject specialists, they will have much more intimate knowledge of the topic that is being discussed in the paper. They will, if they decide to keep the paper in the review process, will identify reviewers, write letters based on reviews, do their own evaluation, and provide recommendation to the editor-in-chief that is kind of connected with this piece. And at the end, the final decision on the paper's acceptance will still come to one of us, one of the three of us. Why are articles rejected? How can we improve the chances at gender work in organization? One is make sure that the paper that you're submitting really fits the scope of the journal. And we have a lot of different topics that we're relatively inclusive and open. However, what is really important to remember that it's not just a journal about work or organization. It's a journal about gender. And so gender issues have to permeate throughout like a golden thread in the paper. It's also very important to ensure that whilst embedding your argument and framing in specific theory, that you may be theory of inequality of, I don't know, Joan Arca at this point, or you are kind of working on intersectionality with kind of Kimberly Crenshaw's work, or maybe something else. But you need to really theoretically develop this beyond what we already know, or showcase some kind of inconsistencies and tensions that are worthy of the academic discovery and debate to enable us to kind of progress with the subject. We also kind of look at specific methodological issues that might emerge. So, for example, it might be problematic to only we do receive, for example, systematic literature reviews, which are very interesting, and we're not against them. But, you know, when the systematic literature review only involves 17 papers that have been read, that clearly is not the full systematic literature review. In the same way, in terms of number of interviews, or when we engage in qualitative study, we really want to see more of the different types of sources and that have been used to generate the insight beyond the mere description of the 3-hour interview or 2-hour interview with an individual. So we really need to find a way to be more holistic and more open, yet at the same time rigorous in the way in which we develop our data sources, how we analyze these data sources, and how the analysis that we produce actually talks back to the theoretical issue that have been the counterstone of the paper. How do we increase the chances? Read the recently published articles in the same area. Get the feel for the language, for the style of writing and ways in which we present methods. How is data analyzed and displayed? Really understand what the journal expectations are. But also, informally, get some friendly reviews from colleagues who regularly publish in this journal. We have so many, but the journal has been operating for 30 years, and that means that there is a lot of people that understand how this journal works, whether the topic fits, whether the study design fits, and whether the writing style actually is conducive of achieving a positive review from the reviewers. There are 2 current special issues that are still ongoing and accepting publications. So one of them, and it's the one that's just recently closed in the summer, but we're still accepting papers for it. It's called Gendered Visible and Invisible Inequalities in the Middle East and North Africa. So have a look at it. If you have something that you'd like to submit to this special issue, please feel free to submit it. And don't forget to write a covering letter in which you can indicate that you have seen me speak about this and encouraging you to submit to the special issue. In addition to this, we have a second special issue that is due, the papers for which are due on 2nd of January 2025, Entrepreneurship Beyond Ideologies, Decolonization of Entrepreneurship for Sustainable Digital Transformation in the Emerging Economies, a Gendered Perspective. That particular special issue came to us from a group of academic scholars that connected in South Africa at our conference 2 years ago, and they've run several professional development workshops. And whilst we know it's going to be popular as a special issue with submissions, we also hope that if there are any of you that are working on these topics, you might be truly interested to submit something and kind of see how the journal will react to your work. I hope that this is sufficient in terms of information about the journal. I really warmly welcome you to submit your best work to our journal. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
I am quite interested as well in the special issue, so I need to declare. And I note your indication of mentioning that my participation in this particular event. However, I just wanted to touch a little bit on one of the slides you showed about how do you get accepted, looking at what has been published before and the language and stuff like that. If we are to consider perhaps bringing something new and novel and trying to push the envelope a little bit, how far can we go? Okay,
so just I mean, it's a perfect question, because one of the things I didn't talk about, the different sections that we have in the journal. So whilst we accept traditional academic papers, we also have a section that used to run in the journal called Feminist Frontiers, that used to accept very open, writing differently type papers. And at this point in time, myself and my co-editors-in-chief are in conversations with a new team that will be coming in January to run a new Writing Differently section. We don't have a title for it yet, but this is like a pre-announcement. And writing differently means using different ways of writing to express not necessarily something that is very rigid and based on templates of academic writing, but something that is free, including poesy, including maybe multimedia, and kind of looking at visuals and use of visuals and other types of sources and of data, as well as interpretation. And what you'll already find that actually the journal in the past have accepted a lot of work which was kind of supported by images, supported by videos. So we have really freedom in which to express something that has to, unfortunately, make a very strong theoretical contribution. So bounding things in gender theory, yet at the same time being free, is an interesting but creative struggle that we have to kind of overcome together. What I also would like to say that as a journal, we have an active LinkedIn page and Twitter page. Please connect to us on LinkedIn. You will see a lot of announcements. We have a conference being advertised that will take place at my institution next year in the summer, just before the Academy of Management. And we hope that we'll also be able to facilitate this writing differently workshops and introduction with the new editors in the sort of early part of 2025. So please be inspired by the work that we're publishing right now. Some of the papers are truly incredible, and also by the 30 years of work that we've already accumulated from different authors that are standing as our sisters and brothers and founders of this specific domain of writing.
Hi, Prof. Thank you very much for the insightful presentation. I just wanted to confirm one thing. You mentioned that when you're talking about the systematic literature reviews, so you mentioned that if someone has maybe 17 or less articles, that's not good enough.
Well, it's not just not good enough, kind of what we need to think about. I think this is a really, really interesting point. I use it because this happened to me this week. I saw an SLR that was submitted. It had 17 papers. The subject was a really wide subject.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm convinced there are more than 17 papers that exist, but why include only 17? So discarding kind of quite a lot of really important work is not a good idea. So to me, sometimes it looks like this particular paper should have been reviewed internally, and actually colleagues in the institutions would have told this particular person, this author, that the scope of the paper was too narrow to result in anything valuable. So what we need to see is we need to have the breadth and scope in place for a subject area that would enable us to produce something of interest that also makes relevance to gender.
Okay, because the reason why I had asked that is, let's say I'm looking at something that it's a fairly new topic, so a lot hasn't been done about that. So what's the best way to go about it?
I would not do an SLR.
Oh, okay.
So this is not the sort of, I would actually do some exploratory work. I would look at possibly different contexts. I would connect with authors from, maybe that are interested in the same topic and connect from different contexts, so you can bridge kind of and create something that's more comparative, for example,
Mm-hmm.
so that you can establish more of the essence of the phenomena before kind of trying to do something that looks like an SLR.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bridget, for this invitation. I'll just go through the journal, the International Journal of Entrepreneurship and Innovation. In this journal, I am co-editing the journal as editor-in-chief with my colleague, Laura Galloway. And we have a team of associate editors alongside our social media editor, Diane. And it is fair to say that in most journals, probably if not all, there is a team of associate editors. So I notice sometimes that the authors assume that all the papers are being dealt with from A to Z by the editor-in-chief, but that is not the case. So once a paper gets through the review process, as Natalia explained, you could probably check through your portal who the associate editor dealing with your paper is, and follow up with them in case you have any questions. This is not to say that the editors remain the first point of contact, but you could also follow up with the associate editors if you want a speedy reply on the details related to the review process. The International Journal of Entrepreneurship and Innovation is about 25 years old now. It was launched in late 1999 by Professor Gerard McElwee and has expanded since. Laura and I took over the editorship in 2020. And in this journal, one of our key themes is to support younger scholars, to support PGRs and ECRs. It does mean that we face certain complications and certain complexities, but we are very much devoted to our cause. One of the things we publish is the research papers, which are the standard papers that are published at all journals. These are up to 8,000 words, and they can be empirical or conceptual papers. But as Natalia reflected, publishing a conceptual paper or a systematic literature review might be quite difficult. This is not to say, again, that we don't see conceptual papers published in 4-star journals, but it is quite difficult to get them published. And one of the reasons behind that is that sometimes the authors assume that a conceptual paper is a compilation of literature with some reflections, and it is not. It does have to follow a clear methodological approach as well. Teaching case studies, and this is quite unique to IJEI, and it's quite also useful for the younger scholars, the PhD students as well, who would like to get their work published in a journal without compromising the theoretical contributions. So in the teaching case studies, you can look at the context of the research and look at how that might be beneficial in a practical sense, focusing more on the practical contributions and presenting that in a way that could help students inside the classroom. And these come alongside suggested questions with proposed answers as well. And something that we recently introduced about 2-3 years ago is the Fresh Perspective Research Notes, FPRNs. These are only 2,000 words. And again, they align with our commitment to support the PGRs and ECRs. They offer a space for the PGRs and ECRs to take the first steps into the harsh publication world and get ABS 2-star publication. When it comes to weighing, it might not weigh up to the level of an empirical research, but it does show proactivity, it does show initiativeness, and it does show that you are taking those steps into the publication world and engaging in a review process. In these FPRNs, you can present a new perspective, propose a new way to look at things, present a new methodological approach or a critique to a methodological approach, or new ideas that might be interesting and worth researching. The associate editor responsible for the FPRNs, or the Fresh Perspective Research Notes, is Dr. Alex Kevill. If you have any questions about those, please feel free to direct your questions to him directly. And he's quite active as well in running workshops at different universities, explaining to the PGRs and ECRs how to formulate these FPRNs, these 2,000 word, quite short piece of contribution, and help them engage in the publication process. Key topics in IJEI: the International Journal of Entrepreneurship and Innovation sits at the intersection between entrepreneurship and innovation, as the name implies. We do publish broader entrepreneurship studies that look at contextual issues. So following from the previous editor, the journal has a very strong standing in rural entrepreneurship, where Professor McElwee had a well-established record of publishing and networking within that particular field. We also like to look at constrained entrepreneurship, unorthodox entrepreneurship, marginalized entrepreneurship, underrepresented entrepreneurship, the entrepreneurship that goes unnoticed. So for example, by refugees, by migrants, by rural, by women in patriarchal contexts, for example, the disability context, etc. So we find these quite interesting. We also are interested in the underdeveloped or the developing economies, which all focus on this sort of unorthodox entrepreneurship. When it comes to innovation, something that we struggled with when we first took over as editors is that we had loads of submissions of papers looking at product development, innovation in factories or in large commercial areas, things that fall more within project development or engineering journals. So we made it very clear within the mission of the journal and the description of the journal that if you are looking at innovation, it has to be innovation within the context of entrepreneurship or innovation within the context of SMEs, and how this innovation perspective helps to advance the field of entrepreneurship or the field of SMEs. If you are looking more at an engineering topic, then engineering journals would be a better and more suited outlet. Calls of papers. We've had a number of calls of papers recently and currently have 2 open on the system. But as you can notice, we do look at things related to empowering entrepreneurs or entrepreneurship in an international context, or the immigrant entrepreneurship, the underrepresented entrepreneurship in the Arab world. The ones currently running are on diversity of immigrant entrepreneurship and the one on researching the Arab world. If you are interested in applying, please do get in touch. IJEI is a CABS 2-star listed journal and ranks in second quartile Q2 on the Scimago journal ranking. Over the past years, the journal has gone from strength to strength, and we have witnessed a growing number of submissions, a growing number of citations to the journal as well. And the H index has grown quite significantly over the past 5 years. So overall, the metrics are looking very healthy, and the journal is moving forward. One of the things that we could probably say hinder the journal's development, not in a negative way, is that being a 2-star journal and focusing on our commitment to support the PGRs and ECRs, it does mean that we face sometimes, or a lot of times, delays in the publishing or delays in the review process. And that is because working with less experienced scholars means that we need to put more effort as editors and more effort as reviewers. If any of you is already engaged in the reviewing process, it's quite difficult. Actually, it's very difficult, and it's getting harder to get reviewers to review papers for journals. So bear that in mind every time you make a submission to a journal, and bear in mind that the editors are following up on your papers, but it is quite difficult to get the reviewers. Sometimes we might get rejections from 10 reviewers before we manage to get one to review your paper. And we have to get a minimum of 2 reviewers to review any paper. Now, this is not just in IJEI, this is actually across all the journals, and it is becoming harder over the years. Some of the things we also face is that because we deal sometimes with inexperienced authors, we get parallel submissions. So we get authors who send us a paper and then email us after the paper is put into review, saying that the paper has been accepted elsewhere and they would like to withdraw it from the journal. This practice is unacceptable across all journals, and it does really waste the time of editors and reviewers. So be careful when you do that. We understand that the intentions might be genuine sometimes, but it's something that has to be noted, and we make it clear in the submission process as any other journal with a tick box. The issue of plagiarism is also an issue that all journals are becoming aware of across the board, particularly with AI and stuff like that. So always beware about the ethical issues which are of growing interest and consideration by the journals. One of the things I want to say about the journal being an international journal is that we receive a high number of submissions from across the world. Submissions are welcomed from all over the world. For example, the highest number of submissions last year came from India, but also only one paper was accepted from those submitted from India, which means that we need to work more closely with our colleagues in India in order to develop a better understanding of how to publish within the context of CAB's listed journals, because it might be a little bit different from the journals dominant in different parts of the world. Some quick tips. I'm not sure how many of the audience are early career researchers, but I think my guess is that we have a large number of audience from among the ECRs and PGRs. The first advice, or one of the main things I would advise, is that you need to pick the journal very carefully. Aim high. If you have research that you are confident about, aim high. Go for the 3s and 4s, because these are the ones that will help you get a job in the UK market, particularly if that is your aim after you get your PhD. If your aim is to expand into other markets or return back to the Middle East or to your own home country, look at the metrics in that country. So in the Middle East, for example, the Schimago ranking is the main importance. In Australia, they have the ABDC. So look at the rankings there and aim high. Okay, read the journal, read about the journal, and see whether there is a fit between your research and what is being requested in that particular journal. When you write the paper, make sure that you engage with the authors who established the domain that you are researching. So if you are writing about rural entrepreneurship, I would expect you to cite the works of Stephen Korsgaard, of Alistair Anderson, of Jared McElwee. If you're looking at research on migrant entrepreneurship, I would expect you to cite the works of Monder Ram or Maria Villares. If you're using social constructionism, I would expect you to cite the works of Berger. It's not about setting the scene in a very superficial way. You have to dig deep into the roots of your topic. Where did it start? How did it evolve? And where are you coming from? If you don't have that sort of background, it is very unlikely that your paper will go through the review process. And when you write your introduction, I would advise you to read some papers on how to write an introduction. And some of the good works are by Dean Shepherd. If you read the works of Dean Shepherd, he does publish a lot on how to publish and how to write a good introduction and how to write a good paper. The introduction is it's like reading a book. Imagine you have a book and it's you read the first paper or the first chapter. If it's not interesting, you will throw the book and you will never get back to it, right? If it's a good book, the introduction or the first chapter will tempt you to go through the whole book and read the whole thing. So make your introduction the hook, make it very interesting, very exciting. Put down your contribution in a clear way and tell the editors and the audience who you are engaging with and what you are developing. If you are doing any methodological transitions or contributions, also mention those in the paper. Now, when I say contribution, it's a word that gets on the nerves of many scholars, I know that, but contribution is at the heart of any publication. But the good news is, by contribution, we don't mean reinventing the wheel. Okay? I'm not saying that you need to make a contribution that changes our view of the world. Okay? Or a contribution that may help us see things in a different way. Now, if you can do that, that would be absolutely fantastic. Okay? But bear in mind, ask yourself, how many papers out there have actually managed to change our perspective of the world? How many papers out there have managed to shift our understanding of a whole discipline? These are very limited works, and these are among the best of the best, the elite works. Okay? So we can name a few of these, but not all the 4-star published journal papers change our perspective of the world. What you need to do is to bring on a new way of understanding things, a new way to look at things, a way to extend our understanding of something. So you can use these sort of words. In this paper, we extend our understanding of so-and-so. In this paper, we contribute to debates on so-and-so. In this paper, we add to the theoretical perspective of so-and-so, and use that sort of terminology, but make it very, very clear. Make sure you contribute to the journal. Make sure that you align with the aims and scope of the journal, and write for the journal. And if you are going to write for a journal, make sure that you cite that journal, okay? Because when you submit to a journal, if you want to establish a strong case that I am actually contributing to the debates in this journal, the best way to do that is to cite works from that particular journal, okay? If you get a rejection, don't submit the paper as is, a rejection after review, or a straight rejection. Don't submit it as is. I've heard stories from reviewers who've had the papers resent to them by different journals without their comments being addressed. So imagine you submit to journal A, and reviewer A gives you some comments and rejects the paper. You go to journal B, and the paper goes back to reviewer A again, and you haven't addressed their comments. It's very annoying to the reviewers, and most probably you will get a straight reject from them. So always think, and it's not just because of that, it's also because those reviews are the views of your readers. So have a look at them and consider them. Some common errors to conclude with: endorsing the same old. Some of the papers we get sometimes are a straight reject because they are not interesting. It's not adding anything to what we already know. You need to be very clear about what is it that you are contributing to. Lack of criticality. As I said, you need to engage with the works, with the background, with the history of your discipline, and avoid simply repeating. Avoid words like, this is the first time to ever have a study focusing on so-and-so, or no one has ever researched. Believe me, someone has, but you just didn't see that. So use the word like, there is lack of evidence, there hasn't been enough research looking at so-and-so, and cite that claim. And don't give up. Everyone has and will continue to be rejected. Bridget hasn't given me enough time to talk about my rejection journey here, but I've been rejected loads of times and will continue to be rejected. Yes, it does dishearten you, and in the first instance you might feel like, how come they don't understand the brilliance of my work? But give it a week or two and then go back to the comments, and you will find that they make a lot of sense in many ways. If you're not happy with the comment and you really believe that it is inaccurate, go back to the editor and discuss that with them in a sensible and critical way. Read what is quality to produce what is quality. This is one of the best tips I got when I was a PhD student from Stuart Clegg, actually. And he said, read novels. Read good books, listen to music, unleash your creativity, write in a good way, write in a good imaginative way. Because if you don't write in a good way, people are unlikely to read your work. Keep on trying to submit the work, keep aiming high. If the work doesn't get published in a 4-star, by all means you can go and try the 3s and the 2s, why not? But don't submit the paper as is. It's quite upsetting to the editors and to the reviewers in some instances. It's very easy for an editor to say, this is a paper that I got because it was rejected by so-and-so. Learn from the rejections. And when you write a letter to the reviewers, write it in a way that shows appreciation to their comments. Remember, reviewing a paper can take a whole day by some reviewers or for some journals. So it's a lot of time to ask. So show the appreciation, write the letter. Don't say, I've addressed this comment simply like that. Say how you've addressed it. One thing that I like is that when you make changes in a paper, use a different color of the font. Using track changes can make the paper extremely messy, so I don't use that, but I do insert revised text in a different color.
In terms of the rejections, and sometimes you find reviews from a journal and then you've addressed the corrections and you sent it back, and then they come back to say, oh, another reviewer that we were waiting for a feedback has now finally come back to us, and we've decided to go with that one instead of the reviews that you've already addressed. Is that an accepted practice?
No. It's a bad practice, I have to say. I would say the reviewers should have an ethical responsibility that once you commit to reviewing a paper, you are actually committing to taking it through the review process. If you don't want, so for example, I might recommend a rejection, and I don't want to review this paper anymore because I don't like it. Then when you email the editor, just say that I'm recommending a rejection, and please, I don't want to review this paper if the editor decides to put it through for a second round of review. At least that will flag up to the editor that you are adamant about not doing it. But just pulling out of it is unfair to the editors, it's unfair to the authors. What we do at RJEI, we don't encounter that so much, but when we do, we try to run the second review by one of our associate editor teams who might be a little bit more engaged with the journal. But it's not always possible to do that. It's an ethical dilemma, but we try to avoid it. Let's say, and we have managed to avoid it in probably all the times, I guess, hopefully. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Miriga Kuwere. There is a question on the chat. What is the AI policy of the journal?
What is our policy for artificial intelligence?
Yeah.
It has, if you do use artificial intelligence in supporting you in developing the manuscript in any way, this is something that has to be declared, and you need to mention how this has been used. We are currently negotiating with the publisher, which is Sage, the extent to which these might be allowed. Currently, they are at the discretion of the editors. So if the editors feel that the AI has been used throughout the manuscript to develop text, we do reject the paper on that ground. If the AI has been used, for example, we get sometimes people saying, I've used AI to reduce the abstract from 200 words to 150. If the abstract reads well, that's fine. But also be mindful that most text developed by AI, it's developed a lot now, the AI itself, but a lot of the text developed by AI is not up to the level that that has to be presented in theoretically developed manuscripts. So yeah, that's basically our policy for now.
Jima, Irene, I couldn't resist. Let me just chip in on this one.
Yeah.
At all costs, please avoid using AI. You can use it when just proofreading your work. That makes sense. I'll tell you something. AI, if it's in my subject area, I can easily pick stuff that doesn't make sense. AI does pick data from a newspaper article all the way to an academic article. Some of the things won't make sense if you read the sentences clearly. When we receive your papers, we do take time to read them very, very intensively, because one, we want to publish your work. That's important. Two, we want to help you to improve it. But if we then discover that some of the things are not making sense at all, especially for our journal, I'm yet to present, but especially for our journal, it is very tight. And I'll show you in terms of the numbers of the papers that we are accepting a year. So please don't use it in the first instance. It shouldn't be your default. Full stop. I can't emphasize that enough.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget, for organizing this extremely helpful and useful webinar. Thank you, Dima, and Natalia previously for excellent presentations. Dima, I think for the benefit of the whole audience here today, it would be nice to briefly tell us about these calls for papers that are currently ongoing with IGHA. So that we are more aware of what to submit and how to submit, and the topics about it. Thank you.
Well, first of all, it's lovely to see you, Shipa. I didn't realize you were among the audience, so thank you for joining.
Always.
The first one we have researching the Arab world, and this one has the second one is on the diversity of immigrant entrepreneurship. The deadline for that one is the 30th of September, so it's quite tight. But it looks mainly on impact on economic development. But the one on researching the Arab world is led by Katerina Nikolopoulos and Haya Dajani as well, who have extensive experience in the Arab context. You can find the details of these special issues in our calls for paper. But one of the things I really admire about the first one, well, being an Arab myself as well, I might be a bit biased here, but I think it's an under-researched context with a lot of beautiful things to be uncovered. So if you do happen to visit the Arab world or research the Arab world or look at certain areas of development within the Arab world, particularly that it's an area that has witnessed a lot of variation. So you get countries like Qatar and Emirates who have boomed, while other countries like Jordan and Egypt who are struggling, Syria, which is facing a civil war, and the situation in the West Bank. So all of these things have impacted on entrepreneurship in a significant way. And there is no one size fits all when you talk about the Arab world. So it's nice to look at the differences and the intersectionalities and how those filter in different ways in the different countries. So that's a quick brief.
There's also one question in the chat, and the person is asking, if we use AI to improve the language, should we declare that too?
Yes, you should. But again, I would be very, very careful if I'm doing that, because if you're an academic scholar, you're at the top of, theoretical articulation. You're at the top of the ladder.
Yeah.
So you should be able to do that job. Now, sometimes I do understand if we use AI to help us in maybe proofreading something or as I said, in an abstract, or find a different way of presenting a particular sentence, paraphrasing it. But to use it throughout the text, I wouldn't do that. I think it will mess up the text and will make it much less critical and less likely to go through the review process.
It's just coming back to AI. I lead a lot of dissertation students, and we see them using a program called Grammarly. Now, remember, our English that we use here in the South African English differs a little bit from what you guys want, UK English or sometimes American English. So then we use the program called Grammarly to help to correct us with just the spelling mistakes, etc. Most persons will pick it up and said, okay, spelling mistakes coming in here, and your writing style will differ from paragraph to paragraph, because we think in Afrikaans. I'm Afrikaans speaking, and then you write into English, and then you go through it again and again and again, and you still make mistakes, and then you run through Grammarly. Now, what has happened a couple of times is when you put it through something like Turnitin, Turnitin will pick it up as plagiarism. So please be aware of that. It's not always true that when you pick it up as plagiarism or generated by AI is corrected. for AI because we wanted to do it in the correct version of English. And this is unfortunate that it happens. We try to keep to UK English, but unfortunately it does not always matter that. So it's just be aware of the different formats of English that you will get. Thank you.
Just a note on that. I think we will witness more and more use of AI, whether we like it or not. And one of the quotes I heard recently is that AI is coming to our jobs, but it's not coming for our jobs. So it's not replacing us. It can't do what we do, but it is certainly coming, and it is certainly going to affect the way we are doing things more and more as we advance in time. If you look at 2 years ago, it wasn't a concern, and look at it now. So we can't avoid it completely, but we have to be very careful about the way we embrace it. Particularly, it's still quite new, and a lot of research is going on around that. So yeah, thank you for the note.
So Dima, one question is, does your journal accept review papers? And will you accept papers on entrepreneurship education in high schools?
No, we don't publish entrepreneurship education. Any paper on entrepreneurship education gets a straight reject in the journal. Review papers, do you mean by that like systematic literature reviews? Yes, we do. But again, the rejection rate for these papers is extremely high because, as I said earlier, a lot of people, they fail to present a good case when it comes to conceptual papers or systematic literature review papers. The rejection rate in our journal is about 88%, and it has gone up from 83% in 2020. It continues to go higher because we are trying to focus on the papers that should go through the review process. Just be careful with the review papers. Yeah.
How can we become editors?
An editor. Well, before you say how, you should ask yourself why. Do you really want to become an editor? It's not the easiest job. It's very demanding, and it can be very lonely because a lot of people don't understand what you're going through. You get the complaints from the authors, from the reviewers, and sometimes forgetting that you're human too. So yeah. So ask yourself, do I really want to become an editor? And I think it's a matter of presenting yourself, working a lot with the journal, and at the end, if the opportunity arrives, just apply for, do an expression of interest, because usually what the journals do is that they announce these things, and when expressions of interest come in, they invite people and ask them. So keep an outlook. Before becoming an editor, think about becoming an editorial board member. So join the editorial board for a journal. After that, become an associate editor. So become one of the consulting editors or associate editors on the journal, with whom the editors deal in order to follow up on the submissions.
Would you accept papers on marketing?
Marketing? No, unless it's entrepreneurial marketing. But again, it can be a bit tricky because you need to put it in the context of entrepreneurship. So the overarching theme is entrepreneurship, and marketing comes next, not the other way around.
Hello, good afternoon, and thank you very much, Dima. That was a very good presentation. I would just like to ask about the fresh perspectives. Does it have to be empirical paper, or does it just have to be like a developmental paper that you have with like BAM and the likes?
Yeah, it's neither, actually. But I don't know, Bridget, if you run these seminars frequently, perhaps it would be a good idea to get Alex as well to talk about the Fresh Perspective Research Notes.
Yes.
It's a short piece of contribution presenting a different way to consider a research question in a particular discipline. So it doesn't compromise your theoretical contribution. It doesn't compromise your empirical data, because I know PhD students are so much worried about their work, and their biggest fear is that somebody will publish the exact same work they have a day before their vivas, which doesn't happen. But we do acknowledge that, and we understand that. So the Fresh Perspective Research Notes is just to encourage people to start thinking about the area that you are researching without compromising your empirical work or contribution.
Thank you. And thank you, Dima. That was a very insightful presentation. I'm just curious, and this is just a follow-up on the question about how you recruit your editors. Do you let people in your editorial team who have not published? And I'm just for a bit of context, because I'm asking, it's usually easier for people who have worked in implementation make better policies, if you'd agree with me. So do you let people in your editorial team who have not published?
Yeah, no, not since 2021. So anybody joining the editorial board should have published with the journal, and anyone becoming an associate editor should have a more established record of publishing, reviewing, or contributing to special issues in the journal.
I do have one question for Dima. How can we do you have a process for special issues, proposals? Do you have a template, or people can just send the proposals for special issues?
Yeah, look at the history of the journal, look at the previous special issues. That would be my first advice. Yes. Develop something within the same way, and then email the editors with your proposal. Okay. Yeah, but again, there are a lot of constraints around special issues, which I don't have the time to talk about now, and maybe Professor Simba can talk about it a little bit more as well. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Dima.
Thank you, Erin. I have a particular focus. I'll take you backstage. I'll talk you through some of the processes we go through when we receive a paper, all the way to managing the paper until it's either accepted or rejected. So I'll go through those things. But just quick insights. I'm an associate editor of 3 journals: the Journal of Small Business and Management, Journal of Small Business and Entrepreneurship, and the other one, International Journal, which is an ABS 2, ABS 3, and ABS 1. Just a quick overview, and I'll point to one figure here, which is the right-hand side, right at the bottom, 5% acceptance rate. The process I'm going to go through, I'll try and explain what you probably should be looking at and thinking about to be part of that 5% acceptance rate. The fundamental elements that you've already heard from my colleagues, I'll emphasize on some of them and add the types of articles that we're interested in. It's not different from what everybody else has said. But like I said, this process is important. Say you finish your very nice and interesting article, you're sitting at home behind your desk, and then you trigger the submit button. I'm talking about Journal of Small Business Management here, which is an ABS 3. I'm not a chief editor, but I'm an associate editor. So that paper either goes to the managing editor or the chief editor. When it gets on their desk, they do what I call due diligence. And I'm sure, this is being recorded. You can take notes as we go along, because I'm going to say a lot of things here. Please be mindful at this stage. There is no two ways about the stuff I'm going to say here. A paper that goes to review or goes through to the next stage of sending it out to reviewers, getting feedback, and me as an associate editor commenting, there are fundamental elements that have got to be in that paper. Which conversation are you connecting with? I heard someone asking a question about, do we just have to follow what has been published? My answer is a straight answer. You need to follow that and show how you are adding to that conversation. So the crucial bit is what you are adding to that conversation. And I heard earlier on people talking about contribution. How are you extending that conversation? Where are you taking that conversation? And it is in our journal. Okay? If we go on our website, we've got right now we've got hot topics that we are interested in. They are all listed in our journal. Don't have to go through them. You need to do your due diligence. Look at our website. What is the current conversation? I'll give you an example. Family business. It's a key thing that we're starting to focus on. Go on our website. It's right at the top of the list of the topics of the articles that we're interested in. Have a look at what has been published and connect with that. If you are coming from, say, from just it's a new topic, we don't have it, it has to be good and convincing. And your chances of getting past the desk reject are very slim. Okay? In addition to the topics and the conversation in the journal, you also need to pay attention, which people overlook, the house style. Ours is an American journal. We've got our preference for a Z instead of an S, for example, how we do our intake citation, and the list of references. Pay attention and follow those things. I always say to myself, and I think Dima has explained that earlier on, if you've been rejected by Journal A and you just take the same paper as it is and it comes to our journal, we can easily pick that. Because one, you have not paid attention to our specific requirements. It is those small things at the beginning that will get your article rejected. Pay attention to how you write, and Dima was dead right. I use Dean Shepherd every time. Simple rules of writing an introduction. As an editor, the chief editor, he has his own style. But if it comes to me, so I'll put stage 3 here. The same process that the chief editor goes through, the paper comes to me, I will go through the same process. Now, for me, it's 15 minutes test. The 15 minutes test, you got to hit me between the eyes. Is the abstract interesting? Is it gripping? Does it fit into our requirements? That's very, very important. Before I say something about that, let me go a little bit backwards. For the first, when you send your paper the first time, and the paper doesn't fit into all those things that we've talked about, I think the first 10 days, so you get your feedback the first 10 days, either from the editor or from me, because I will go through the same process again, checking whether it fits in, whether it connects to your conversation. What is important in that stage, I call it this stage, you need to stalk. Yes, I'll repeat the term, you need to stalk the editors again and again. Why is that important? Because if you are sending a paper to Journal of Small Business Management and then the editorial board, none of us has an expertise in the subject you are talking about. You are shooting yourself in the foot. So you need to check people in the board. What have they published? Because they are going to handle your work, including the editor. That bit is very important, and a lot of people tend to overlook that. So make sure you do your due diligence. Check what exactly I'm working on. If something comes and sits on my desk and I don't have any expertise, and there is no one who's got expertise, your chances of going through that desk reject, they become higher and higher. So we could do, the editor sends it to me, the chief editor sends it to me in 10 days, and I go through the same process of checking those basic stuff. One of the components that we are so focused on nowadays, that's why you got that 5%. So I'll come back to that 5% acceptance rate. What exactly are you adding to the conversation that's already happening? What are you contributing? Where are you taking the conversation to? Those things have got to be clear. This is a personal thing I'm going to say here now. You may choose not to listen to it. I've heard several people and scholars saying there is a gap in the literature, there is a gap in the literature. Hear it for the first time. That's a myth. There is nothing called a gap in the literature. It limits you from emphasizing on your contribution. I'll tell you what you need to think about. When you look at the literature, think about what's the tension in the literature. Where is the divergence? Where are people diverging? What is the confusion in the literature? Focus on those areas. What is the impasse? Where are the discrepancies in the literature? Where are the limitations? That gives you the chance to build your contribution. So that's important to think about that very carefully. So yes, you've heard it for the first time, nothing called the gap. If I'm happy with the paper, you've gone past the first stage, and then I will send out for review, and I'll give the reviewers 30 days. I heard the question of somebody asking about how do I become an associate editor? I'll tell you something briefly here. For the first journal I was an associate editor, the Journal of Small Business and Entrepreneurship. It's an ABS 1. I used to review for that journal. I never said no to a request to review as one, and I did a good job. The letter that came to me, this was after a year and a half. The editor said, "You've been reviewing for us, you've published for us. We think you'll be a good associate editor." You know? So how do you become one? Participate in that community. You are also involved in reviewing. You are also publishing in that particular journal. The other thing here on stage 4, I've seen a lot of people say, "I don't have time to review. I don't have time to do this." Well, you also want your papers to be reviewed. And if you don't get a response from us in time, you send emails and say, "Where is my paper sitting?" Are you also participating in that community? That's very important. Stage number 4, it is very difficult, because if I don't get the right people to review your work, it will not go anywhere. So I think for people that are here, sign up to do reviews for journals. That's very important. The editor, the associate editor, they would have invested a lot of time looking at your profile to match your qualities with the paper that has been submitted. And if you don't respond to them, it affects the whole process. Okay, I'll move on. So I've sent it out for review, and it comes back. So it comes back on my desk, and there are a number of things the reviewers would say. Major revision, minor revision. For the first 30 days, it's very rare. I don't know, my colleagues here may have come across that. It's very rare that for the first days you get a minor. If you get a minor, oh, well and good. Okay? The reviewers may also recommend reject. Okay? However, if that paper, remember the associate editor is on your side because they've decided to send that paper out. They've seen the value of the paper because it fits in all the things I explained earlier on. It hits the scope of the journal, it engages with the conversation, and you demonstrate that you're actually speaking to our readership. The other thing I didn't explain on stage 1 and stage 2, a lot of people overlook writing a letter to the editor. If you've been doing it all along, start writing a good letter from today. I often call it a love letter to the editor. You need to demonstrate that you understand the conversation that's happening. Even better, you can, the associate editors, you can actually write a name within your letter to say, someone who's got the expertise to be able to handle our paper is associate editor A. You're making it easier for the chief editor. That's important. People ignore that. Pay attention to those small bits. They're very important. Okay, so I'll come back to stage 5. It has gone out for review. It comes back to me. This process, stage number 5, it's a challenging process because lots of things happen here. You might get 2 reviewers that are in different ends. Very extreme. Accept, reject. We do get that. the editor, associate editor, would have to reconcile those, come in between, or send it out again to a third person. It could be the person in the editorial board. It could be an expert, so that we can get a third opinion. So there are lots of things that happen here. I could reject it outright, but as an associate editor, I'll also read it very carefully to make sure that what I've heard from my reviewers, it's actually a fair judgment of what's in front of me. Remember, by the time you get to stage 5, your paper has potential and it's promising. I'll come back to stage 5. If I say, for example, stage 5, send it back to you and say, I'm giving you major revisions. Irene, hopefully you'll do another session on responding to comments from both the reviewers and the editor. There is an art of doing that. I think Derma did put on your slide, people just say, that's done. That's not the right way. You need to walk me through. What have you actually done? Which parts of the paper have been changed? Using a simple color, very, very important. Because once you get to stage 5, your chances are you're getting closer and closer. So why would you want to lose it because you didn't do the revisions properly? Normally, when the editor discovers that the two reviewers are in extreme ends, pay attention to the elements that the editor is saying to you. Pay attention to these elements. Address them fully. If you're not clear, go back to the associate editor and ask them the question. Is this the way I've understood it? Is this the way I'm expected to do it? Ask that question. The last bit is the exciting bit. Because at this stage, you've actually gone through that rigorous process and all of that. For our journal to get to stage 5, that's 6-8 months, and it can take up to a year. So that process is back and forth. And the last one, I could say I accept the paper, but it's a conditional accept. I want you to go and do proofreading. Professional proofreading. To answer the question to people who talked about AI, do not use it. If as an editor I get a sense and you didn't declare it, on my dashboard it tells me the percentage of plagiarism. If I investigate further, don't put a seed of doubt in my head. Full stop. If I get a sense that some of the things that are being said here, they don't fit the language we expect, Journal of Small Business Management, you are putting a doubt in my head. And I tell you, half the time, I will find a fault. You don't want that. So it's important when you're given instructions, for example, go and get it proofread professionally. On our website, Taylor and Francis, we can actually give you a link. You go to specialists that actually do that. This is a fine journal. You don't want publishing in this could be a deal breaker for your job, for your promotion and all those things. Just be careful. And what I'm emphasizing on, you are dealing with me. I'm just a human being like you. Just follow some of the guidelines. If you use Grammarly, I will answer the question that was asked earlier on. If you use Grammarly, it doesn't change the whole thing. Your story remains as it is. Where I was saying don't use it is when you're constructing a paper from scratch and you're using AI. That bit don't. Because if I get a sense, if I pick it through plagiarism or something, it will be very hard to prove to me that this is original. That's one thing that we emphasize in our journal. The article has got to be original. The article has got to be contributing. So if I've got a doubt that it's not original, then you're just shooting yourself in the foot. So hopefully I've shedded light on stuff that happens behind the scene. And as we go through, I've fed in things you should avoid and things you should pay particular attention to and actually work on them. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hello, Dr. Bridget. Good to see you.
Yes.
My camera is not on. Hello, everyone.
Yes.
Oh, some names I know. Oh, look at Dima.
Yes.
My boss, IJEA. Excellent. I like the way you handle that question on whether marketing papers can be published in the Entrepreneurship and Innovation Journal. obviously, as long as it has a slant on entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship marketing is trending. The question I want to ask, and that goes for everybody here. Somebody reached out to me recently talking about guest editors serving as reviewers for their special issues. Can you let me know what your thoughts are on that? What do your respective journals think about if myself and two other colleagues are guest editing a special issue for a journal? Is it a problem if we also serve as reviewers?
Thanks, Prof, for your question. From an ethical perspective, it's better if your guest editors managing articles that are coming to your own special issue. It's good to send them out. You are also, in a way, going to be doing reviews of those articles when they come back, because you're going to make a judgment on whether you want them to be on the special issue. So my personal view, yes, and the number, especially in our journal, we don't have a special issue, by the way, running at the moment, because there's a backlog. We tend to have a backlog. And the other thing I didn't explain, our journal, we are receiving a lot of papers. I think we're almost 800. We tend to get 1.2 a year, which is just too many. So going back to your question, I think it's always advisable from an ethical point of view, papers that are coming to your special issue, get them out to independent reviewers rather than you doing the reviews yourself. You're going to do it anyway when the reviews come back.
I think I agree with Alan on that one. We do the same thing. It's better to get reviewers and leave the editor to make the independent choice based on the comments from the reviewers.
Professor Amon, when you were talking, you talked about the gaps in the literature and all that. So there's someone who's asking, other than calling it a gap, what should they call it?
Okay, I'll repeat myself. I've just said it. It's either you're observing tension where there is no agreement in the literature. I'll put it in quotes. The so-called gap should be your tension, your impasse, divergence in the literature. Why am I saying so? That gives you a very good platform for you to project your contribution, therefore, to that conversation. Informal entrepreneurship, for example, as a topic, started all the way in 1973. If we are constantly saying there's still a gap, there's still a gap, there's still a gap up to today, surely there's something wrong with people that study. I studied informal entrepreneurship. The gaps that you're looking for, is that tension? Is that divergency? I think that gives you scope to then propose your contribution.
Okay. Shoma, your hand is up.
Okay, thank you, Professor Amon. My question is around ECRs and your journal. Is there an opportunity for us to even have a chance? At least Dima had said that they have, something special for ECRs and PhD students. Your journal, is there an opportunity for us to even have a chance, or you're looking for professors?
Good question, and a very hard question to answer. I'll try my best to answer that. And I'll take a step back. I'll not answer it directly. A good strategy. One of my first top articles, I worked with someone. I worked with an experienced scholar. Started an institution. Work with people that have actually published that journal. Because one of our emphasis is the originality of the work and the quality of the writing. For us, that's important. There's no two ways about it. What I've seen a number of times, and I ask myself to say, have you looked at what the journal on the website tells you what you should do and how you could achieve that quality? That's very important to look at that. You get people that are just copying and paste stuff from a thesis as there, and then you plug them. With 5% of acceptance rate, it means the quality that's expected is very, very high. What we don't want to do, and heads off to Dima, I'll take heads off, because if it comes at that quality, one, you are exhausting your reviewers, and it will take longer through the review process, which you don't want, and probably it won't survive the review process. The reviewers will just kick it back. I've answered your question as a politician.
Okay,
Thank you, Bridget, for your invitation. Let me share a quick presentation with you. My colleagues has already touched some very interesting point, which I don't want to go over again, and I think are very, very clear, and I agree with all of them. I'm managing editor of Journal of Intellectual Capital. I'm editorial board of Journal of Knowledge Management, Management Decision, and Journal of Entrepreneurship. My role is very different in all of those journals, but in my experience, mostly in Journal of Intellectual Capital, I can give you some hints and some insight how to improve and how to aim for those specific journals. Actually, I was smiling when some of you asking for artificial intelligence, and this image actually comes from artificial intelligence. And this is the way that I use artificial intelligence, because honestly, so let's remember that we are human. So when we do research, we don't need them to be replaced by artificial intelligence. But actually, we need to use our human skills, our idea, our creativity, our research creativity to put in place some new project. And this is which I'm passionate about. And honestly, I don't want to be replaced by artificial intelligence, which gets me bored and annoyed how to write paper. So publish or perish, which I think is always being a question about that, is always a matter, a big concern that really stress about. So we have to aim to a very high ranking journal. If we look at the ABS list, actually academic journal guide, so we aim for 3 and 4 star or 4 star plus, or we go for the Financial Times journal, or if we are look at the American side, we look at for the A journal, or actually if we are look at the Italian side, we look at for A journal too. So this is takes us for a high, very competitive environment, and also a very stressful environment, because at some point we just look at what is the ranking of this journal. I need to go there, but what is the passion about the topic that we are writing about? So how much we like that topic, how much is interesting that topic. So think about this. Some of you has built up a topic, actually research for here, and you need to show that you really like that topic. But sometimes, do you know what? In what we fail? I think in something very superficial. Let me use this word, and sometimes it's very stupid. I have highlighted these 3 aspects, which is journal scope, journal guideline, and contribution, original contribution referring past and recent research. So the first one is fact. How my article or my research fed the journal scope. So what I have to do, first of all, go to the journal, read the aims and the scope of the journal. Why I am asking you, I'm telling you that, because in my experience, some people, they don't read that, they just try. And this is in some ways funny, but it's also sad that you don't know how to submit your research, that you just try to submit your research, because I think it's very relevant to read aims and scope. I heard before some question about, can I publish in your journal something about entrepreneurial education? And I think if you go to the aims and scope of that journal, you will not find that. So just for that, it's very relevant. Also, you save time as, because we need to go through the article, we need to read your article, and just to say, okay, so it is interesting, we can pass on to the associate editor, or otherwise we just need to desk reject it. But if you know that your article has no chance for that journal, don't waste your time, and don't waste our time. When I started my PhD, my supervisor told me, do you know, Veronica, the first thing that you need to do, look at the journal guidelines. So the reference style, the abstract, and the other aspect. Because if you are really interested in that journal, you should know what are the journal guidelines, and your article should reflect on that. And I was, yes, right. Otherwise, you should just say behavior, a lazy behavior, which actually you haven't looked at that. Yes, I am partially interested in your journal, but basically, I don't know anything about your journal. And in my case, showed that you are not interested in my journal. So when you are really interested in that topic and you really want to publish in that topic, you have to read the author guidelines. Again, save your time, don't waste your time, save my time, don't waste my time. Original contribution and passive research. Yes, I think before Professor Amon was just saying about research gap, and I agree with him. At the same time, if you're interested in that journal, I mean, at least you should read some articles published in that journal. If you want to show how to contain the argument, the discussion, that journal, at least you should read some article on that journal. At least you should know if that journal goes for empirical articles, for conceptual articles, or for qualitative articles, quantitative articles. This is all those parts are very relevant, and you just read recent article, past article, just also to show how your article fed. You go back to my first insight with that journal. I want also to show with you, there is a call for paper, and let me add another thing to the previous question, what you were asking for. Is it okay if a guest editor act as a reviewer? Yeah, there is in some way we can say yes or we can say no, it depends how much effort is trying to get reviewers. Guys, getting reviewers is not an easy thing. So we are author, but at the same point, actually, in the same time, we are also reviewers. How many times have you rejected an invitation as a reviewer? Thousands of times. And same time, guest editor, but as well as editors, as well as managing editors or associate editors are struggling to get good reviewers. Actually, now good reviewers are so precious because they spend so much time in making a very good reviewers and helping out us in improving our papers. But there is also a big group of reviewers which actually they just don't copy and paste. They review. And sometimes it doesn't make sense. And as Amon said, as an associate editor, I need to go back to those reviews and I need to be sure that this makes sense. So going back to the guest editor question, yes, sometimes I think he has no act as a reviewer if he has a chance to add new reviewers. But if you are really struggling to get reviewers, what he can do or what she can do. So this is, actually, is more effort for him or for her to do a good job. But we as editor or with managing editor, we asking the guest editor to do a good job because the last decision, for example, in Journal of Intellectual Capital, goes to the editor-in-chief. So it's not the guest editor that makes the last decision. In our case, is the editor-in-chief. If the guest editor doesn't want to diminish his reputation or her reputation, he has to do a good job. Here, there are two call for paper. If you're interested in that, please just submit. Relevant question that I want to go quickly through with them, which is research question. So what are the most relevant and promising research question, which add another thing to your paper, the storytelling of your paper. So how you are telling us and discussing us and narrating your research is so much relevant. Let's get in love with your research. So theory and concept. It's quite strange that sometimes I get people confused between theoretical framework and theoretical background, which is something very relevant. So it is something that we need to focus on. So research design and methodology, don't be lazy on that. You need to show every single part of that. I like to say that we need to feel like a baby. When a baby starts to say anytime, why? So we need to ask that. So we need to feel that when you are writing this part, we need to say, okay, why this methodology, why this sample, why this amateur people, we need to justify everything. Above this discussion, how we can connect different topics. How we can connect our theoretical, managerial, and also actually now policymaker contribution. And also connection with other categories, because we also like to talk about the multidisciplinary aspect. So we don't want to stay close in our group, in our discipline, but we want to create connection with other disciplines too. This is what we should do that. So if you think the journals, if you go to the associate editors, each associate editor has got a topic, which topic can be linked to each other, but they also have got their own topic, which is own expertise. And this is very relevant because when I'm going to submit a paper, I want also that associate editor look into my paper because he's an expert in that topic, but also has got the flavor to discuss that topic with the different backgrounds, with the different categories and the disciplines. It is also what the journal does. So we tend to say our focuses are this, but they tend to also to embrace different categories and different domains. So this is very, quick in what is my many presentation, and I have just left 5 minutes for question. And if you have any question for me, these are the journals, and each journals has got some connection, which is the managerial aspect. But it's also an important aspect which connect all of those is the intangible asset that comes to the intellectual capital, to the knowledge management, the management decision, and also the entrepreneurship. So, Bridge, this is my quick and short presentation.
Veronica, I enjoyed your presentation. It was very spot on. I think the issue I raised about guest editors serving as reviewers, I think you hit the nail on the head. Reviewing for reputable journals is a voluntary exercise. They don't get paid.
Yeah.
It's difficult to get reviewers, and that's what brings about the backlog in papers and authors waiting for decisions, even up to a full year. So as long as the guest editors or special issues declare no conflict of interest, my personal position on that is that they can quite comfortably serve as reviewers for their own special issues. And that's a very important point you raised there. I'm also glad to note that you're involved in management decision, which I'm involved with, and a couple of other journals. And some of the key things there, when you talked about research gaps, I made a comment in the charts. Somebody asked the question, I think it was Dr. Ade Dola, that mentioned something about research gaps and all those sort of things. What I tend to do when I'm targeting a particular journal is I'll look at previous work that's been published in that journal and look at what their research limitations are and their suggestions for future research. Journals are supposed to publish articles that build upon previous publications in that journal. So you pick up from those research limitations and what the authors of published articles wish they would have been able to do. You pick it up from there and build on that. That's what knowledge is about from my own perspective. Bridget, that's all I have to say, really.
I would like to begin with a heartfelt thank you to Bridget and a remarkable team behind this event. And I think this isn't just a webinar, but again, it's a carefully crafted vision for developing better scholarly research. And from my conversation with colleagues and students, it's clear that a webinar of this nature is truly needed. And I'm pleased to see such a strong turnout here today, which highlights that this is not just an extension of what the journals do, but again, it's a call to action for us to start submitting our work and building those research networks. And again, it's good to see many of the people who were at the BAM conference here today. I'm still at BAM. I must also acknowledge my co-editors, Natalia, Amon, Veronica, and Dima, whose insights and dedication have been instrumental in bringing this event to life. And again, thank you for your continued support. For want of time, I won't be using slides. And I want to take a slightly different approach by speaking briefly. So I'll keep it short, brief, within 3 to 5 minutes. I want to use this time to look behind the context and importance of my journal, which is the Journal of Trust Studies. And it's pretty much slightly different from all the fantastic journals that we've heard the editors speak about today. So for today, I'm wearing two hats, one as a long-standing member of the research community and the other as the editor of the Journal of Trust Studies. Firstly, we can all attest to the fact that the world around us is rapidly changing, and we see that the internet has transformed how we access and share research, unlocking new avenues for spreading and disseminating knowledge. But I think underneath this, there's this burning question: should research be freely accessible to everyone, or should it remain behind paywalls? Is it not frustrating when you are eager to access research papers and find that your university doesn't have the rights of subscriptions? And many of us, again, have experienced this, and I struggled when I was a doctoral student to access many papers. It's a challenge we need to tackle head on, because the question is it not time we start to think about how we make research available and accessible to everyone? It appears that in our society, where trust is the foundation of our social and professional and institutional interactions, we should be able to have a free and open access journal that is dedicated to providing a unique platform for exploring that concept of trust. So our Journal of Trust Research of Trust Studies meets this gap heads on. And for us, our mission is clear, and we want to be ambitious to serve as a leading forum that unites scholars and policymakers and consultants and even practitioners on the global dialogue and conversations and trust. And for us, I think it's an important issue for the moment because we see open access as a monumental shift in the way knowledge is shared. So I think we are a very international journal, and we are biannual and open. We've got that open access, and we are committed to making all our content and all our papers free and available. And again, this is kind of consistent with the principles of the Budapest Open Access Initiative that ensures that everyone, irrespective of where you are located, can access and download and share our articles without restriction. And for me, as someone who struggled over the past, I felt it would be good to champion this as a new and premium journal. So we were established last year, and we are published by the Open Academic Publishing. It's a global publisher that champions the open access model. And the open access publication is registered in Norway and also publishes the Journal of Digital Transformation and Journal of Systematic Reviews, and all of which adheres to the open access principles. And of course, the idea is to make sure that our scholarly research is accessible to all. First, I think we must acknowledge that, just like my colleagues here have mentioned, that AI is transforming how we write and produce research. Just like as we rely on tools like Google and Grammarly, AI is becoming a key part of our writing process. So for us at the Journal of Trust Studies, we expect authors to use AI ethically. This means you being transparent how that AI has been used in your research, including the prompts you use, and ensuring that it supports your work rather than replacing your own critical thinking. I think for us, the goal as a new journal is for us to embrace AI because it's the future. It's going to be our culture. It's going to be our way of life. But again, we wanted you to embrace it as a valuable tool while again upholding the highest standards of integrity and originality. We, as a journal, we welcome strong theoretical, conceptual, and empirical papers. We also we like systematic literature reviews that address a wide array of topics related to trust and distrust. The editorial board's annual target is to publish over 100 papers, including book reviews and editorials. But I think one thing that is interesting is why we strive to maintain rigor. We do not want to be perceived as too elitist, as many of the journals we have today. And again, for us who are early career researchers and mid-career researchers, many of the reasons why journal articles have been rejected, as explained by my co-colleagues here, and I won't belabor the point further. But again, I think the idea is we need to be able to show how our research contributes to theory and policy and practice. But again, with a strong emphasis on impact. But again, as a reminder, it's encouraging to see that for REF 2030, and so many of you might know here, ABS journal rankings will not be used as measures of significance, originality, and rigor for the next REF. So that's what, for us as a journal, we want to be able to welcome articles and perhaps even reports and policy papers that address many of the wicked problems within the society. And I think for those policy and research papers, policy reports and policy papers, they shouldn't extend beyond 5,000 words. But again, our word count for the other generalist academic submissions is 8,000 words. Executive editorial board, we have a set of experienced editors. We've got Carmen, a professor from the University of Brazil. We have Professor Karen Cook, who so many of you might know, who is a layman Wilbur, professor of sociology from the Stanford University. We've got Noam Ebner, who is a professor of negotiation and conflict resolution from Nebraska in USA. We've got the senior advisor to the president of Taiwan, who is Hing Swang Michael Hiao. And again, a host of many other learned and experienced academics. In terms of our submissions, we welcome submissions from trusts to online trust, to the credibility of digital platforms, to institutional trusts and institutional distrust, political transparency. And I think for us, our scope is vast and multidisciplinary. I think some of the key things we would like to see is things around credibility, the typologies around trust, media trust, institutional trust, organizational trust at the macro level, at the meso level, at the micro level, social capital, trust theories, political and interpersonal trust, trust in governments, societal trust, and a host of other aspects on trust and distrust. We have in place a very fast yet rigorous publication process that ensures high quality researchers so that we can get the papers out promptly, but again, without compromising academic integrity. And currently we have two special issues in progress. One focuses on trust and context, and the other on trust and artificial intelligence. And both of them have submission deadlines of January. I think the idea around the special issues is to ensure that we kind of look at the evolving areas of trust, but again, bring in fresh insights for scholars and policymakers. So, but again, what kind of sets us apart, like I mentioned, is that open access, because again, we want that knowledge to be universally accessible, free from barriers, and ensure that our content is accessible to everyone, whether students in developing countries or policymakers at international institutions, so that we can kind of foster and drive that strong conversation around the global dialogue on trust. And again, this is about more than removing those paywalls, but again, it's about building that inclusive and informed discourse that can drive meaningful change. Looking ahead, we're happy to announce several exciting innovations. Some of the things we want to do is launch our podcast series that will feature in-depth discussions on trust-related topics with experts and policymakers and practitioners. This kind of makes our platform more research accessible, and again ensures that we are able to engage a broader audience by bringing that study to life and again exploring the practical implications. Then we also have a series of short format submissions, perhaps short management papers, and some impactful pieces that provide us actionable insights for policymakers and practitioners. We've got a LinkedIn page, and again, we want you to join us. Hope to nurture a more inclusive and impactful conversation, but again, also supports early career and middle career development of researchers here today. We want to see you sending your papers, and I'm happy to take questions. But again, thank you, and I look forward to the exciting discussions that lie ahead. Thank you so much again, Bridget, for the opportunity.
Thank you so much for that presentation. You mentioned open access. Someone in the comments has already asked, and that question was directed at Professor Amon earlier. And the question is, why are academic journals charging so much for open access? When are they going to move away from the practice of charging money? So that is a question. And the person did apologize for being so direct, but would like to have an answer. So if you can address that for us, please.
I think very
quickly. Okay, I'll keep it simple. I think firstly, open access is a publishing model that makes research articles freely accessible to everyone without subscription fees or paywalls. So what this means is that anyone, anywhere can access and read and use that research without having to pay for it or have any institutional access. Now, the goal of that open access is to increase the dissemination and impact of research by removing any barriers to access. Now, one of the questions you ask is, why are some journals charging for open access? I think why the principle of open access is to make that research available. The process of publishing, involves a high cost. Publication is expensive. This includes the expense for peer review and editing and hosting content online. But again, even the peer reviewers don't even receive any money.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So we don't receive any money. So many open access journals, again, there are some journals that, but I think a lot of the journals, take into consideration this cost, the cost of publishing and ensuring that these journals remain sustainable. Again, there's a strong ecosystem, but again, ensure that those journals have a healthy stream. And again, many of these universities subscribe to the journals. So I think the idea around those journals charging a lot of money, is perhaps to ensure that they're able to maintain the high quality the high quality of maintaining those journals, and also paying people who also work around the operational aspect of the journals. So I think there are still conversations around that, and a lot of universities pay huge amounts of money, running into hundreds of thousands, to have access to journals. So it's a strong ecosystem. It forms part of our research community. But again, I think, in my opinion, is that the world is changing, and soon there might be a need to start looking at, why do we have to pay so much for our publication? So for instance, you write a paper and you submit to journals, and you realize that your university now has to pay for that access to your own paper. Sometimes it doesn't really make sense, but again, it's what's on ground, and maybe we'll get to see what the future is. But again, the idea is that why they charge those monies is because of the process of publishing, and maintaining those high quality journals also involves high costs. So I'll stop at that, and maybe Amon wants to shed some light on it.
There are two things here. So as a journal, you have to link up with the publisher. So the publisher, they own the space, and I think the costs are related to the processes that are involved in all that process, making it available and accessible each and every time. So I don't know whether this could be changed or if there's a way to do it, but I think Kingsley's just explained in terms of their journal. It does involve a lot of money publishing one paper. So I think that's where it comes in. If a university is paying for access to that, I think that's a good thing. Whether the cost will go down, I don't know. I think that part is the publisher.
Thank you, Bridget. King, I enjoyed your presentation.
Thank you, sir.
That is a promise. I'm going back 20 years when I was earlier career researcher. Your journal would have been my main target. Regarding the APC thing, there's nothing wrong with charging APCs. It's just when you begin to charge somebody 10 years salary to publish a paper. Can you imagine you publishing in a journal and your employers don't have access to your own paper, not the journal's paper, your own paper? So this raises another set of issues. Who owns the intellectual property rights? Are you free to make your own publication in a journal open access? We are not making the journal open access. Open access at least to your own employer, to your affiliation and friends and family, without incurring the wrath and the legal development of the publisher. Yeah? APC, I have no concerns with. But how can you be charging somebody £2,000 for subscription? Who does that? So that's my concern with open access. I'm glad this open access issue is coming up. But you see that your journal, kindly share the link to your journal with Bridget so that you can share with me. I will cook up, I will develop, I will craft an article for your journal because I like the fluidity of it. Yeah, the all inclusivity of it. Thanks. Awesome presentation.
Thank you.
Absolutely, Professor Madiche, and it's a pleasure to hear those kind comments. And we are open to ideas and suggestions. And I think the idea is about inclusivity and getting people to publish. I struggled when I was a doctoral student to gain access to journals. I struggled to gain access to many leading journals, and I'm thinking, and this is not to denigrate the excellent work many journals are doing. But again, I think the idea of research is to kind of promote an inclusive culture whereby people can contribute their research and again gain the scope to develop and again address many of the wicked problems in our society. So happy to welcome articles, but again, make sure it's focused on trust, and I'll be looking forward to hearing from everyone.
It's interesting that we're talking about open access in the context of a journal about trust. And I think that I think I do have a problem with APCs first, because as a researcher, that's a lot of work that you put into producing a paper, hopefully trying to establish a society, and then to ask that you pay from your pocket to get that out to the society is also something. But again, in the context of even talking about trust, I think part of the challenges that we have is that there's not a lot of transparency around how this money, and I do agree there's a lot of money that goes into publishing, but there's not a lot of transparency about who pays what and then who gets what out of, is it a for-profit, is it a not-for-profit, who gets what share of whatever profit comes. I think people would be more interested in paying and benefiting society if they could see exactly, kind of follow the money. And so it's just interesting that we're having this conversation around APCs in the context of a journal about trust.
Absolutely, I do agree. I do agree with you, because I think for those academic journal publications, I agree that there's a lack of clarity around the financial aspects, and sometimes these ownerships are hidden. So again, we need to come to understand how these profits are reinvested into the journal, or I think most of those profits are perhaps maybe distributed to the stakeholders. Because the idea is journals should be able to operate without that primary goal of generating profits. And if there are any revenues, I think the revenues, rather than being invested back into the journal again, should be able to be invested into supporting the authors. My mindset, my model is around journal houses paying the journal authors money for their research, and that's how it should be, because this is my intellectual property, right? I expect if I come up with a journal, I come up with a piece of research, why not pay me for that? Even if you pay me £20 or £50, it means a lot to me. So I think those are kind of conversations we should be having. How are we rewarded, rather than being rewarded through promotions in our universities? Perhaps there should be some kind of financial element to us as stakeholders. Because we are core stakeholders, we need to start enjoying the benefits of our research.
I think in South Africa, that's what they do. Publishing in South Africa for the academics is such a huge money. I don't know if they've changed the model. There were some South Africans in this group today, but when I was living in South Africa, I think for every publication, they used to give like 35,000 rands at that time to the publisher. So people were, but they did have specific journals that you can publish in. So if you publish in those specific journals, there was reward. I don't know if they have changed it, because academics the numbers are growing every day. So maybe it's a model that they may not be able to maintain. I'd like to say thank you to all our speakers. Thank you. And this is the first time we've done something academic. We've always had our webinars to talk about women, because it's a women research network. But I've seen the kind of interest that this has generated. And I agree with Professor Amon and Dima. We need to have a follow-up. These webinars are bi-monthly. So there will be a follow-up webinar in the next 2 months on some of the issues that they've raised, like responding to comments from reviewers and all of those things, and how to align your papers to suit the journals and all of that. So we will have a follow-up, and I will let you guys know as soon as we know who the speakers will be, and so that we hope to have you back again for this follow-up discussion. Please follow us on our social media pages.